Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Dementia Discussions. My name is Donald Hutera and I am sitting in City and Hackney Care Centre, London Fields, with Elaine Rowan, whom I've just met a few minutes ago. And Elaine is responsible for or part of the team of Talk Changes, which is an initiative at Homerton Trust.
That's right.
And today we are going to be talking about, in a stress-free fashion, about stress, particularly as it impacts carers of people with dementia. Before we do that, before we plunge right in and also address some of the very particular issues that people have sent in, what is stress? How do you define it? And I've got my definition, and I'm sure all of you have various versions of it or understandings of it. But what is the official line on stress?
I think that's a really good point, first of all, in that we all have our own understanding of what stress is, and that's based on our own individual experiences of managing difficult situations. So I think I suppose the definition that we would tend to use in cognitive behavior therapy of stress would be that stress occurs when the demands that are being placed on us outweigh our perceived ability to cope with those demands. So we try to look at it in quite a practical way, really. And obviously, if you are caring for somebody with dementia, there's going to be an awful lot of demands being placed on you, from a practical point of view, from a physical point of view, from an emotional point of view. And those demands sometimes can really feel quite overwhelming. And it is quite common, I think, for carers to really feel that they can't cope with a lot of these demands on quite a regular basis. I think it's important to emphasize, however, that sometimes feeling stressed in this way is quite normal. It is quite a natural reaction to difficult things. It just becomes a bit of a worry if you're feeling stressed more often than not. And that might be the time that you would need to stop and kind of maybe think about how you're managing things and if there's anything that you need to change.
Because the impact of stress, what sorts of effect does it have on people? What are the manifestations of stress? And again, I've got my version of it, but let's hear what you've got to say.
Yeah. So I guess, first of all, very often people will find that their thinking changes. So people start thinking that they can't cope. People start thinking that they are alone. That nobody understands the situation that they're in. Emotionally, people start to feel anxious, depressed, sad, lonely, overwhelmed. Physically, they might notice that they're feeling very, very tense, very tired. They might notice anxiety-related type symptoms, in addition to the tiredness, in addition to the physical tension. So maybe, I don't know, kind of a knot in your stomach, increased heart rate in response to things that wouldn't normally cause an increased heart rate. So physical symptoms like that. And then obviously very often with stress as well, the things that we do changes. And one of the interesting things about stress, and actually a lot of other kind of common difficulties that people would have, like depression or anxiety, is that very often when we are experiencing stress, we stop doing the things that could actually make things a little bit better for us. So, for example,
such as
not wanting to talk to people. So if we are feeling stressed and overwhelmed, very often we will withdraw from people that could possibly potentially be a source of support for us.
So it's disengaging when maybe engaging would be a really healthy diversion or just a strategy to find relief.
Yeah, exactly.
I interrupted you there.
No, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of one of the first things that people will notice is that kind of sense of, I just can't be bothered doing that today. So their behavior changes quite a lot. They might notice if they are feeling particularly anxious about getting things done, that they're jumping from task to task, which very often, it can work for some people, and I think it's important to look at things on an individual basis. But if you are quite stressed or anxious and you're jumping from task to task, very often you reach the end of the day and you feel like you've actually achieved nothing, even though you haven't sat down all day.
I'm smiling because I'm identifying with everything
Yeah, I think
saying.
A lot of people can, and I think it's a very easy behavior to slip into if we are anxious and we're all And we're all, guilty of it from time to time, I think.
It's about situations where you feel you can't focus. There's so much that needs to get done. I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and maybe none of them get done quite satisfactorily because there's so many of them.
Exactly. And then you reach the end of the day and you look at that mental to-do list that you had and you think, oh no, I've actually done nothing. When you've started all of these things, but then that leads to another cycle of feeling low, feeling like you're not achieving things, and another cycle of kind of emotions and withdrawals, and it can just really reinforce itself in that way. So it can be a really big problem. It can be kind of sometimes a downward spiral that people get stuck in, really, and it can be quite difficult to stop and climb out of that. So it can have a massive impact on carers who have the world and all of demands on them sometimes.
Because you're not only looking after someone or maybe more than one person, but you also are meant to be looking after yourself, but that becomes sometimes next to impossible.
Yeah, and that's the really difficult thing, I think. And very often, I know with carers who I've worked with, carers very often they do have a tendency to put other people's needs before their own, which makes sense given the role that they're in and the level of demands that are being placed on them and the urgency sometimes of some of those demands. But I think also you do have to remember that if you don't look after yourself, it's going to be very, very hard to look after other people and to help other people. And in CBT, I think that's one of the things that we try to do. We try to help people to change the way that they think about things, to change some of those behaviors that might just be making the emotional impact more difficult to manage.
Now, later on, we'll talk about talk changes and a bit more about some strategies that might help alleviate stress. But I think we should go into these questions.
Yeah, that's great.
So I will read them out, and then you can give some expert advice or response.
I'll do my best.
Of course you will. I know you will. Number one, I'm 25, living at home, looking after my mom who has Alzheimer's. I'm not her official carer, but it's just me and her most of the time, and taking care of her is taking such an emotional toll on me. She can't cook, clean, operate the TV on her own. There's very little she can actually do for herself, and it's worsening my anxiety tenfold. I've suffered from depression and anxiety for about 10 years now, on and off, and I'm about to go on meds again because things are so stressful. I don't think that medication alone will help me to deal with the day-to-day stress of looking after mom. Is there anything that I can do to help me in those moments when I just want to give up?
Well, first of all, it does sound like a really, really difficult situation. And it sounds, going back to what I was just saying about the level of demands versus ability to cope and resources to cope, it does sound like this person is under an awful lot of pressure, and it must be really, really hard to manage. I guess in terms of kind of just trying to manage that stress and that anxiety and that depression in a slightly different way, obviously kind of it's important to seek professional help if you are starting to get overwhelmed, so going to your GP, seeking therapy or seeking other kind of support. But on a more day-to-day level, it can be helpful to just look at that balance that I was talking about around between kind of between the demands that are being placed on us and our ability to cope with them. And where sometimes if we look at the demands that are being placed on us, there can be just little small things that we can do to reduce those a little bit.
Such as?
So very often people find there is kind of help out there. So very often people aren't maybe kind of maximising the use of their support network. It might be worth just thinking, is there anybody who can help? I don't know, sit with my mum while she's eating for 20 minutes while I pop to the shops or pop out for a coffee or go meet a friend. So even just little things like that sometimes, just creating a little window in your day for you to focus on some self-care, some social, so just contact with some people in your social network can have a massive, massive difference.
I realize this may not be appropriate to go into any sort of, because we don't know what the details are, but the person who wrote this talked about being on meds again and doubting that they would help. Any thoughts about that, or is it do we simply not know enough about the situation to shed any light on that thought?
Well, I don't prescribe medication. My background is in psychotherapy, so my knowledge of it is limited to kind of what patients tell me, or what I would have read kind of in an unofficial sort of a level. Generally, antidepressants are equally as effective as talking therapy. The most effective treatment for depression and anxiety is, according to NICE guidelines, is a combination of antidepressant medication and CBT therapy. And it's almost like you're getting that double whammy of two treatments that are effective, but at the same time. There's a lot of antidepressants that are prescribed for depression and anxiety that are quite effective. But I think very often people don't give them enough of a chance. You do need to wait 6 to 8 weeks to notice the effects. Very often you have to start on a low dose and increase it gradually and kind of taper it up that way. And there are some side effects that people find unpleasant that make it quite difficult for them to stick with it. But generally people do notice a difference if they can stick with it. Also, there's different types of antidepressants that go with different people. So sometimes people will have to try a few different ones before they find one that's actually effective for them and that works for them.
And so again, it's a case of being really patient, if you can be, in a situation that isn't always conducive to patients.
Yeah, and again, I think also looking at, is there anything else I can do in the meantime to try to reduce those demands that are on me, or to try to increase my ability to cope with it. So reducing demands by looking at kind of practical support. Is there anything else that I can access? So this lady said, this person, sorry, for some reason I assumed it was a lady.
Yeah, me too, but we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. And this person, possibly they're saying that they're not a registered carer. Is that an option? Would they be able to access more resources if that was the case? Again, we don't know kind of what's the input of social services, of carers, carer support. So just looking at all of that and seeing what support is available on a practical level to try to reduce some of those demands can be really helpful.
So if there is support there, you just have to seek it out and ask, demand. And
I guess kind of just knowing what, and I think that's why the Carer Centre here is a really, really useful resource, because it allows people to access advice on what they might be entitled to and what is available in the area. So I think any stress reduction is going to come down to a combination of reducing those demands that are being placed on you and increasing your ability to cope with those demands, be it through self-care, through increasing kind of your social network, and just making use of some of those coping resources that may or hopefully are going to be available to you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Numero 2. My husband is in the middle to late stages of dementia, and up to now my daughter and I have managed to cope without any help. But his condition is quickly getting worse, and I'm finding I'm not coping. He says some very nasty things to me, tells visitors to get out of his house, follows me everywhere, wakes me up 3 or 4 times in the night. Then last night I was woken up by a neighbor at 1:30 a.m. saying my husband was looking for me. I know I need help, but I have no idea where to start. I feel as though I'm letting both my husband and daughter down, and this makes things even worse.
Again, it sounds like a really difficult situation, and it sounds like it's one that's quite fluid in that it's changing on an ongoing basis. So I guess kind of thinking about that person, first of all, it's going to be a massive adjustment, isn't it, on so many levels in that household. There's going to be an adjustment in relationships and lots of things that are going to be very overwhelming. Coming back to, I guess, kind of the basic sort of stress management issues again, thinking about, is there any way of reducing some of these demands? So talking to your daughter, who sounds like kind of a co-carer, negotiating between you kind of, okay, so how can we make sure that you're kind of sharing this equally, that we're kind of both contributing, that we both are kind of respectful of having time to ourselves sometimes as well. Sorry, I've forgotten so there was something there as well about finding it quite hard when he's saying nasty things. And
In following her around and waking her up in the night.
And I think that can sometimes be so hurtful for people, and it can be so hard to cope. Coming back to what I was saying at the start about stress, how it can affect kind of the way that we're thinking about things. And it's very easy, I think, to take those types of comments and things like that quite personally and feel quite upset by it. And sometimes it can be important to think about, well, why are they saying this? And that can be kind of, sometimes it can just help people to take a step back from the situation and not let it have such an emotional impact on them.
That must be very hard when it's somebody that you've known for decades or all your life or whatever, and how to not take personally manifestations of an illness that are not necessarily in control.
Yeah, it is a very, very difficult thing, and I think that's kind of part of the massive stress the carers of people with dementia are under. It's kind of that complete change in the relationship with that person that occurs over a period of time can be a massive adjustment.
And family dynamic, because if there's a spouse and a daughter, it's shared, and that in some ways can be quite a good thing, potentially. But it also, everybody will be impacted in a household, because that's how it goes.
Definitely. And also sometimes people have different ideas about kind of what care will constitute and which kind of what needs to be done and who should be doing it and how it should be done. So I think in that situation, communication is really, really important. You have to be able to kind of communicate with the co-carer, but also, again, with other services, other service providers in the area, and making sure that you are accessing all the support that you can. Did that person mention as well that their dad or that their partner was deteriorating, or was that?
No, but it's good. It's interesting you asked. Oh, it's quickly getting worse.
Okay.
Yeah. I picked up on that too.
Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering then. Okay, does this person maybe need to be kind of reassessed in terms of kind of to determine their level of need from social services and things like that? Because obviously, as you know, dementia practice is progressive, and sometimes people will need to be reassessed as the illness progresses because their level of need.
And that reassessment might be helpful. Also in knowing where the illness may be going, and to prepare for that in advance so that it isn't quite as much of a seismic, shocking thing.
Yeah, so that you have things in place for when certain deteriorations kind of occur. Definitely.
Do you see people, more than one person at a time? Do you do family? Do you do two members of the family at once, or do you tend to, when you're seeing clients, or are you? Is it 1-to-1, or does it depend?
Generally 1-to-1. Yeah. So we do have a limited capacity for couples therapy as well, but generally you just see people on a 1-to-1 basis.
Okay. I was just curious.
No, that's fine. Good question.
I've recently recognized the stress of caring is giving me considerable anxiety. When I think about this, it's hardly surprising, considering I'm responsible for every aspect of my dad's care, from his finances to grooming. I want to start to look after my own health, as I know that this will only get harder and I will face situations that are distressing. My friend has been seeing a therapist, and this has helped her. But there are so many different types of therapy out there, I find it really confusing to know what's right for me. What would be the best type to help me deal with my anxiety?
It's a really good question, and I think it can be a bit of a minefield sometimes when people go about seeking psychological therapy or support for anxiety or depression, because there's so much information out there and there's so many different types of treatment. What I would suggest, first of all, is speak to your GP. They have a wealth of knowledge about all the resources that are available in your area, different types of therapy, medication. If that's an option, they can talk through all of that with you. In Talk Changes, the main therapy that we would offer would be cognitive behavioural therapy. But what we CBT, yes, well done.
Yeah, we were joking about the alphabet. I call it the alphabet soup of industry.
Yes, we're definitely an industry with lots of acronyms, which can be difficult for people who are not in the trade to understand sometimes.
Are there any others besides CBT? What other acronyms are floating around?
IPT, interpersonal therapy.
Okay.
BCT, Behavioral Couples Therapy, MBCT, Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy, MBCT, yeah, Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy. So there's lots and lots of abbreviations for lots of different things. But the way that we work as a service is if you have a GP in Hackney and you're over the age of 18, you can refer to our service, and the first thing we'll do is we'll do a 30-minute telephone assessment with you. And that's usually within a week or two. And from that, then we'll be able to kind of make suggestions and advise you on what the most appropriate type of therapy might be for you. It might be with us, or it might be at another service locally.
In an age where information is very readily available on internet, I do this with all sorts of things. I will look up, I'll do my own research.
Yes.
Is that in a health context? Is that, how do people in the health profession feel about people doing that? Because I know sometimes if you can get, it can increase your anxiety potentially, because you will be reading about the worst possible situations. And but also I believe that it's very important to be informed.
Definitely. And it's it's a delicate balance, isn't it? I heard a term last week for the first time, a Google chondriac, which I thought was quite an interesting one. But I think it sums up exactly what you're saying. In that, yes, certain amount of research and understanding and knowledge is very, very useful, and it helps you to make an informed decision about something. But sometimes if you take it a little bit too far, it can actually start kind of, I suppose, reinforcing a lot of anxieties. What I would say is, yes, do some research, but maybe stick to resources that you know are reputable. So NHS website is a really, really good resource. They have information on, I don't think I've ever put a health condition into the NHS website and I haven't come back with some sort of detail. And that's also quite useful because it will tell you the treatments that are available on the NHS and how to get help in your area too. So yes, definitely certain amount of research, but stick to those reputable sites so you don't get overwhelmed and bogged down and go down rabbit holes.
Because I know the word that was used was confusing, but I also think for me, the more information I have tends to be clarifying. That's sort of what I want. I want clarification. So by clarifying, by knowing what's available, or at least having some handle on it, I find I'm less confused.
Okay.
But that's just mine.
Yeah, and that's really positive, I think. But again, sometimes some people will get overwhelmed if there's too much information. Yep. And like I said, there is that tendency sometimes, particularly if we're stressed anyway, gets up into internet rabbit holes that have lots and lots of different symptoms about things that actually aren't really related. So we do have to be careful, I think, about the balance there.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Number 4, I have just become a carer for my dad. One of his symptoms is repeating himself all the time. I find this to be incredibly frustrating, and I find myself getting angry or stressed out when he just won't stop asking me the same question over and over again. What are some of the things that I could do to help me manage the stress and not get angry with him? And I'm really glad, because I was thinking in the other ones, I was thinking about anger and resentment and how that ties into stress and how you handle, manage, and cope with anger and resentment.
I can totally see how that situation would just be incredibly frustrating and incredibly difficult to manage. I think it's something that you see quite a lot in carers of people with dementia. It's just that, oh my God, it's just this pure frustration. But then very often what will happen with the frustration, it leads to somebody snapping, and then they feel guilty. And then because they feel guilty, they feel even more stressed and say, no, I can't do that again. I have to be better. Which ultimately, because their stress levels are rising, makes them even more frustrated the next time the person is repeating things or behaving in that way. So again, it can be a really difficult cycle to break. One thing I would say is trying to keep your background levels of stress to the minimum, going back to this idea of trying to reduce the amount in any way that you possibly can, trying to increase your ability to go through self-care, through taking that time for yourself, like you were talking about earlier on. Because we know that if our background levels of stress are higher, we're much more easily frustrated. We get irritable much more easily if we've got lots of anything going, which is a natural cumulative effect, I think, that all human beings are going to be guilty of. So if we can reduce that background level of stress, it's going to be much harder to reach that threshold where the film snap, where we feel frustration, where we start to feel angry. In the moment, again, if we do, one thing that can be quite useful is noticing and learning what your early warning signs are that you're starting to get frustrated. So a lot of people will notice, okay, well, nothing makes me I'm going to stop in a minute. Or tension, yeah, physical tension is a big one. Maybe temperature differences, they might notice their face getting hot and they start to get a little bit frustrated. Or just heart rate increasing, chest tightening, shoulders tightening, jaw tightening. And everybody will have their unique signs that their body is starting to get stressed, that emotionally they're starting to reach that point where they're going to stop, where they're going to do something that's going to possibly come across as aggressive or angry or upsetting and leading on to that later. So once you've pinpointed what your early warning signs are, then you're in a much better position to catch this before it becomes an issue. So then I guess it's about trying to figure out what's going to work, what's going to help me when I notice this early warning sign to kind of stop that trajectory of frustration and stress, I guess, in that situation as well. So noticing the early warning sign, okay, here's my red flag, what do I do? Right, well, let's just stop. Take a deep breath. Which again can be really hard if you've got somebody talking in your ear. But I'm glad you mentioned breath, because I think sometimes it's a natural thing. When there's tension, you stop breathing. You or something happens that you're not thinking about breathing and you're not doing it. You're blocking your breathing. So taking a deep breath and just breathing deeply in general is really valuable. Not even breathing deeply, just focusing on your breathing and just reminding yourself that your breath is there. You're here, you're grounded. Okay, yes, this is a frustrating situation. There was a reason why this person is behaving like that. Okay, can I take myself out of this situation for 2 minutes until I feel a bit calmer? And so taking that really brief time out and coming back and dealing with it, hopefully, will help us do it in a bit. Can I ask you about laughter therapy? Okay, I don't know enough lot about laughter therapy. But well, I don't either, but I've done it. Okay. After my sister died, and it was part of a whole range of complementary therapies. Because the ability to laugh about a situation or find it, I don't mean to make fun of it or be sarcastic, but to find the humor and find something lighter, which is what I associate with humor. I don't know if that's of any value to anybody, but I think humor and laughter are really important. So, and also it's related to perhaps not taking oneself. I take what I do seriously, but I think I tend to not take myself too seriously. I don't know if that's healthy, but it seems to be working. If it works, go for it. I guess from the point of view of what I've been trained in, we would probably look at that as kind of your interpretation of the situation, and how you're interpreting the situation impacting on how you respond to it emotionally. So you're describing, okay, so I'll find something humorous in the situation that will make me laugh, that I will find funny. It's going to change my emotional response, which is hopefully going to make me feel calmer, and hopefully going to make me respond to that in a more helpful way or a more productive way. That is. And there are physiological changes in laughter, just as in crying. Yeah. I mean, I think crying is a really... Is crying underrated or not? But I think it's a really useful thing, because it like laughter to me, it makes a change in my body. It shifts something. So I'm not going around sobbing a lot, but I do cry. I'm not, I think crying is really good, folks. Yeah. And I think it can always be helpful. Yeah, exactly. It can always be helpful to express our emotions, as long as we are finding it helpful and people around us are finding it helpful. And I guess, like you said, it would be concerning if we were crying all day, every day, or crying for more of the day than not crying then, Because expressing the emotions, when things get blocked, when there are log jams and stagnations, that can be where problems also arise. Yeah, we have to be able to express how we're feeling, but I guess it's just about doing it in a appropriate way sometimes, being able to say, you're making me feel really frustrated, as opposed to just stop. Yes. And they both potentially have the same effect. It's just a method of sending like that. Thank you again. You're welcome. 5. I've been feeling a lot of stress recently.
I'm part of the sandwich generation, caring for my mom with dementia and supporting my adult daughter through her first pregnancy. My mom's needs are increasing. She needs me to help her with almost everything, whilst my daughter's pregnancy has been a nightmare. I'm feeling totally taken for granted by both my mom and daughter. I don't have any time for myself, and I'm just feeling more and more hopeless. Is there anything that I can do to help with how I'm feeling, or ways that I can carve out time just for me?
What a difficult situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, double whammy, really, isn't it? So the question there is kind of carving out time for her. And again, I think that's kind of, I feel like I've been a little bit repetitive about that this afternoon.
But good things are worth repeating.
That's what I always think, and I think it's something that people really do underestimate, not just how important it is to have even just those few minutes by yourself of doing something relaxing, doing something pleasurable. But I also do appreciate it can be incredibly difficult to carve that out on a practical level. So I guess just based on kind of what that person has said, again, looking at kind of those demands, how can I reduce those demands even slightly to give myself 20 minutes on my own? 20 minutes to do something, do my hula hooping, whatever the interest is, whatever it is that kind of relaxes you and helps you to switch off even just a little bit. It might be tough. I mean, does her daughter know that she's feeling under this pressure, that she's feeling so unappreciated? Have they had that conversation? Is there anything they can negotiate between the two of them? What other support is available? Yes, certainly for this person who's caring for both of them, but also, does the daughter have anybody else who could possibly kind of help with symptoms or whatever? Again, I feel like I have enough details, but I guess kind of just looking at that wider support network and saying, okay, is there anything that we could possibly make use of to free up 20 minutes?
Which is about asking others for assistance in whether it's professionals or friends or other family members.
Yeah.
And just saying, can you do this for me, please?
Yeah, and I think it's something that people struggle with a lot, because very often people feel, well, no, I should be able to do this all by myself.
Responsibility, it's my responsibility.
Yeah, and it's kind of, it's up to me. And I can completely understand how people develop that idea when you do feel alone with somebody and alone in that role so much of the time. But very often it can become a case that kind of people are assuming more responsibility than they actually need to. And again, that's not always the case. Very often carers do end up being quite isolated and quite overwhelmed with demands. But I think it's important to make sure that is actually the case, that you have maximised the level of support that you can get from other people in order to help you to have that time to yourself.
I know, Elaine, in previous conversations that I've had as part of Dementia Discussions, there, one suggestion was that carers find some activities that they can do with the person that they're caring for that are pleasurable for both of them.
That's a really good idea.
And I just was thinking of that again, that can be one way perhaps of alleviating stress. If you both do something that's kind of fun or enjoyable, whatever that may be. Going someplace or enjoying some food or some cultural thing, some piece of music or television or a dog or a walk in the park
or just sitting enjoying the sunshine. Music can be a really, really powerful thing, I think, as well, if you do kind of have that shared enjoyment of it. But yeah, really, really good point. Just kind of finding something that's going to give you that sense of pleasure during the day, so you don't feel like all of your activity is about necessary tasks.
Duty and dealing with the serious stuff, the problematic stuff.
That's going to be there anyway. You might as well try and carve out a little bit of that relaxation for yourself.
So good luck to that person. Best of luck. 6, my other half is now quite advanced and not capable of doing much for himself. It's been about 8 years since my life ended, to all intents and purposes. Although social services and dementia services have done their best to help, I am mostly coping alone. I am coping alone. He refuses to go to respite, which was only 6 hours every 2 weeks, and ungrateful as it sounds, a couple of hours occasionally is no break for me. I have started having unsettling thoughts and have a pre-sleep dream of packing up my car and disappearing overnight. Somehow this makes me relax for sleep. I recently fell in the hall due to sheer exhaustion and stress. I'm no longer able to cook. I don't eat much at all myself and give him ready meals. I have lost 4 stone in the last 2 years. I usually forget both our medication. I feel that I have reached my limit and don't know how to continue.
Well, dear, it sounds like that person is in a really, really difficult place, doesn't it? I guess one thing that's really striking me there is I'm really getting a sense of hopelessness from this person, and that they are starting to lose the ability to really care for themselves. And well, possibly that's gone for quite a long time, but they're starting to kind of lose the ability to care properly for the person that they're caring for as well, because of their own well-being. She's talking there about the stress taking a real physical toll in terms of the weight loss, collapsing, as well as an emotional toll, feeling really, really overwhelmed. And yeah, feeling quite hopeless with it all. So I guess kind of in addition to trying to put in place all the things that we've talked about already, I'm wondering if it might be useful for this person to go see their GP, sit down, have a conversation about how they're feeling, speaking to the GP about their own well-being, seeing if there is anything extra the GP can suggest for the person they're caring for as well. But it does sound like this person needs some time to really, really focus on themselves.
Yeah, that's a very distressing read.
Yeah, definitely.
And sounds somewhat urgent.
Definitely more.
And yes, how to improve.
Yeah, and I think it's quite tricky, isn't it? I mean, obviously, there's not a lot of detail there, but there's just that real sense of feeling like this person's reaching the end of their tether. And just bearing in mind, there are lots of support services, even just listening services. I mean, massively, massively helpful if you're feeling like that. So the Samaritan's Helpline, for example, there's also kind of a local crisis line. So even if you can't leave the house and you're feeling kind of stuck, trapped, alone, you can pick up the phone and just give somebody a call who will listen, and it can be really, really helpful for people sometimes.
Thank you, Elaine. Our 7th and last is a short one. Mm-hmm. I had an episode of losing it with my husband today, and have been asking myself questions about my temperament and ability to continue. I don't believe that I should make myself ill in the course of caring, and yet I foresee this as a serious possibility. What can I do now to start taking care of my psychological and physical health?
Excellent question, and I think it's quite a nice question to end up on and kind of round up and summarise everything that we've been talking about. So first of all, well done to this person for identifying this and noticing it and noticing the signs.
And saying, what can I do for me
now? Exactly, because again, very often people don't notice until it's gone too far, or until they are feeling overwhelmed, or like the previous lady, really starting to notice the physical and emotional toll of things. I keep thinking that these people are ladies, but might not be the case. But yeah, in this particular case, again, revisiting some of the things that we've talked about kind of balancing the demands that are being placed on you as much as possible, maximising your use of your support network, any kind of services that are available to support you, using the resources in the carer centre to make sure that you're accessing everything that you are entitled to. That would be kind of my first recommendation on a practical level. On a level of more kind of self-care and looking after yourself, going back to kind of having that balance between activities that are going to be necessary, which generally can take the whole day if you let them, and having just those few minutes, just that little bit of time for yourself, doing things that are relaxing, that are enjoyable, and even things like that can have a massive impact on stress, and just help you to feel a little bit more in control of things. Again, coming back to kind of what I mentioned earlier on, if people are starting to feel overwhelmed, there are professional services that can help with that. Speaking to your GP, can be the therapy, the counselling, all of those things can help just to kind of keep you fine-tuned, I suppose, on an emotional level, and able to cope with things better.
So we've now reached a point where you can talk a bit more about talk changes.
Oh yes, okay.
And what it is.
That was quick.
how long has it been going, and just what is it?
Okay. Well, Talk Changes is an NHS primary care psychology service, which doesn't mean a whole lot to most people. But we're a psychology service that's part of the Homerton Trust, and we offer talking therapy. So mainly CBT, some IPT, some behavioural couples therapy, to people with depression and anxiety disorders who have a GP in Hackney and are over the age of 18. So if people are starting to feel overwhelmed, if they are starting to feel like, yes, something's not quite right, or this is going on a little bit too long, I'm feeling sad more than I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling anxious more than I'm feeling calm and relaxed, then sometimes it might be a good idea to get some professional help. So what we do is we offer courses of therapy based on cognitive behavioural therapy. And what that is it's a talking therapy, so you would meet with somebody once a week, or you would have sessions over the phone or online. And the idea is that we will teach you skills and strategies and techniques to help you manage stress, depression, anxiety, whatever the issue is. And we do that by helping you to identify and to change some of those behaviours that might be making things worse. And also by looking at kind of what you mentioned earlier on about interpretations. So how your interpretations of situations might be also kind of contributing to stress. And just is there another way of looking at it that might make things a little bit easier, or that might be a bit more practical when you're feeling overwhelmed. So the number of sessions that we offer varies depending on kind of what people need. You can self-refer to the service online or over the phone. You just Google Talk Changes Hackney, and you can go straight onto the website, fill in a very brief form with your contact details and a brief summary of what the problem is. Within a few days, somebody will call you back and arrange for a telephone assessment, at the end of which they'll kind of discuss kind of the treatment options with you and make suggestions about what the best way forward might be for you.
And how long has this been in place, roughly?
That's a very interesting question, because I think it's been one of those services which has evolved quite a lot and has changed quite a lot over the years. So as in its current form, I suppose it's probably around 5 to 10 years. Prior to that, it was a primary care psychology service. It's been around for a very, very long time.
Has it been rebranded at all?
Yes, it's been rebranded. Okay. Yeah, it's been rebranded in the last 12 to 24 months. So yeah, in that sense, that's exciting.
And that rebranding is partly to make it more visible so that people do have access, which is another alphabet soup thing, improving access to psychological therapies. Yes. IAPT, well, that I learned today.
You're on a roll today.
I will.
Yeah, so IAPT, improving access to psychological therapies. That's a national program that's been rolled out over the last 10 years across the country, and we're lucky enough to be part of that program. And the idea is, as is written, improving access, so making psychological therapy more accessible to people day to day in their own communities. That's what we're hopefully trying to do.
Can I ask you, Elaine, two things? One is, how did you get into CBT or therapy in general? And well, I'll ask you that first. So
okay. It's a very long road. So I was always interested in psychology, just as a subject, as a topic. Always interested in kind of the clinical aspect of psychology and mental health as well. So a lot of mental health practitioners in my family, so mental health nursing, lots of different things. So I did my psychology degree and my master's. Started working for the NHS. Opportunity came to do some training as a PWP, which is another nice one.
What's that? What's PWP?
PWP is a psychological wellbeing practitioner, and they work. They provide kind of guided self-help, CBT-based interventions to people in IAPT services. They started off doing that, and then over the years progressed up, did more training and more training and more training, and I completed my training in CBT about 5 years ago.
And what's your client load like? How many people do you tend to be seeing? And also, how many carers do you tend to see? Is there any sort of numerical figure for that?
It actually varies quite a lot. So in our service, the amount of clients that people will see will vary depending on other responsibilities that they might have within the service or within the trust.
So we've got to wind up now, and I wondered if you have any last words about stress. Any other insights? You provided plenty of thought-inducing and helpful information. How's your mic doing? Good.
Not sure why that keeps happening.
But you're not stressed about it.
No, that's the point. It's done now. So last words about stress. It is normal. We all get stressed from time to time. However, if you are starting to feel like you're stressed more than you're not, then it is probably time to start thinking about, are there any changes that I need to make? Or do I actually need to go and get some professional help to make those changes? So contacting us at Talk Changes if you've got a GP in Hackney. Also speaking to your own GP.
Wherever you may be.
Wherever you may be, exactly. Just trying to put in place some of the things that we've talked about today. They seem small, they seem basic, they might seem obvious, but just because it's obvious and we know it doesn't mean we always do it. So
I don't think they're small at all.
Yeah, good. Because they're not really in terms of the application of them, they can be huge. But just focusing on yourself, recognizing when you need a bit of help and not being afraid to ask for it. I think are probably the key messages I'd like people to take from this. So here's to, as much as possible, a stress-free life. Thank you for being with us today.